We start tonight with a first. On Tuesday, Ukraine fired US-made ATACMS into Russia. The strikes came after Washington authorized their use on Russian territory. Now, the aim is to limit Moscow's ability to launch attacks and supply the front. Russia has described the attack as an escalation, marking a new phase in the war.
Ukraine's first use of ATACMS longer-range missiles is being seen as a milestone in its defence against Russia's invasion. It came after US President Joe Biden finally gave Kyiv the green light to use the US-made weapons against targets deeper inside Russia. Moscow says the 6 ballistic missiles launched were targeting a military facility in Russia's western Bryansk region, though the Kremlin says its air defences shot down 5. The attacks coincided with the passage of 1,000 days since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began. After marking the occasion in his own parliament, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky told EU lawmakers not to be fearful of doing more to end the conflict.
Every today is the best moment to push Russia harder, and it's clear without certain key factors, Russia will lack real motivation to engage in meaningful negotiations.
Arriving for a defence meeting also in Brussels, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte said Ukraine would need more support to prevail over Russia.
Today marks 1,000 days of the full Russian onslaught, the unprovoked full Russian onslaught on Ukraine. So today we'll discuss how we can help Ukraine to prevail. That means more aid, more money, and we have to make available to them, particularly now that the North Koreans have come on board.
Rutte is not the only leader to regard Moscow's addition of thousands of North Korean troops to combat operations against Ukraine as a major provocation. It may also have influenced Washington's decision to allow Kyiv to deploy ATACMS. Now Washington's move has prompted Russia to update its nuclear weapons policy. The newly released doctrine permits a potential nuclear response even to a conventional attack on Russia by any nation that's supported by a nuclear power, even if not a nuclear power itself.
Long-range missiles are going to be applied from Ukraine into Russian territory. It will also mean that they are operated by American experts, military experts. And we will be taking this as a qualitatively new phase of the Western war against Russia, and we'll react accordingly.
Not all Western leaders are on board with supplying longer-range weapons. Despite pleas from Kyiv, Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz has refused. Now the world must wait to see whether Washington's decision will hasten the resolution or the escalation of the 1,000-day-old war.
Let's bring in nuclear expert Mariana Budjeryn. She's with the project on managing the atom at Harvard University and joins us tonight from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Mariana, welcome to DW. Now, we heard it there. Vladimir Putin has considerably lowered the threshold for Russia's use of nuclear weapons. Why?
Well, the changes to the nuclear doctrine of the Russian Federation have been in the works now for a year, so it's not exactly a knee-jerk reaction to the decision of the Biden administration to give permission to Ukraine to strike inside Russia. In fact, President Putin had previewed these changes in September this year. But the actual release of the document, we haven't seen it yet. That was timed as a response, I suppose, to Biden's decision. I also don't regard these changes as drastic. They're actually, upon close reading, they don't constitute a really great departure from the previous doctrine. Some of the formulations have been relaxed, it is true. The overall nuclear threshold has been lowered, but not in such a significant way as to cause panic or great concern.
Could you elaborate on that? What makes you think that this is not a major escalation?
So, for instance, a nuclear response to a large-scale conventional aggression against the Russian Federation, that was in the previous doctrine too. The thing that changed was that in the old doctrine, it was the kind of a large-scale conventional aggression that put the very survival of the state in peril. Now, in the change doctrine, it's a critical threat to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Russian Federation, but also its ally Belarus. So yes, it gives a bit more interpretative room for a decision maker, specifically President Putin himself, as to what exactly constitutes this situation where there's a critical threat to sovereignty and territorial integrity. One more thing that was added in terms of situations that sort of permit the use of nuclear weapons is a massive combined airspace attack by all sorts of projectiles and aircraft, both strategic, tactical aircraft, but also drones, cruise missiles, and so forth. So that part is new. But again, the doctrine elaborates that these are a situation of, extreme emergencies, and not every attack would require such a nuclear response. And also to add, nuclear doctrines are important documents. They're important in communicating your resolve and deterrent threats to your adversary, but also to your domestic audiences.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah. Let me just jump in there. What is Putin trying to communicate here then? If you're saying that he's really not willing to risk a nuclear escalation, if I'm understanding you correctly.
I'm saying that Putin would possibly risk a nuclear escalation in extreme circumstances, for sure. But, Ukraine striking a few targets on Russian territory would probably not constitute that. What he's communicating is, the latest instance in the long line of his nuclear signaling, which is trying to sway the West, to convince the West to influence its support for Ukraine, to break it up, especially now in this very vulnerable moment when Ukraine is in a tough spot, but also Western political, domestic situations in many countries are not conducive to long-term Ukrainian support. I'm sitting here in the United States, so we know exactly what I'm talking about. So this is part of the program that in the game he's been playing since the very beginning of the war.
Yeah, we've seen this for a really long time. I'd like to know from you, to what extent do you think that Russia's nuclear saber rattling up to this point has shaped the response of Ukraine's allies that you're saying they're trying to influence by this? Looking back at these past 1,000 days.
It has been successful, not entirely, but partly successful for sure. Just think of how careful and cautiously Western capitals have considered and reviewed their policy towards Ukraine. In terms of arms supplies, every new weapon system was analyzed very thoroughly for its escalatory potential. It took more time. Sometimes these weapons did not arrive when they were actually needed at the front. So the timing and the kinds of weapons and the pace in which they were released was certainly influenced by fears of nuclear escalation. But the West sort of slowly salami sliced into the so-called Russian lines, but really it's into this Russian sense of impunity, right? So in a sense, Russian nuclear threats are not working because Russia uses them in situations in which they're not meant to work. Nuclear threats are not meant to be effective in these situations entirely. They're meant to prevent a nuclear strike, right? Deterrence, nuclear deterrence is their more credible purpose. And unfortunately, because of Russia's sense of possibly conventional inferiority, its conventional military has not performed well. Putin's war aims have not been achieved in a way he envisioned them. He is making up that insecurity by applying nuclear threats into the realm where they cannot be entirely effective.
Yeah, I don't want to let you go without asking you, because you've of course had a close eye on Russia and its nuclear capabilities. What do we know at this point in time about the state of Russia's nuclear arsenal?
Well, we don't know a ton, simply because this is a secretive enterprise with nuclear weapons programs. We know, their number. We know the delivery systems. We know that tactical nuclear weapons, of which there are almost 2,000, have been considered as non-deployed, so they're stored separately from their delivery vehicles in central storage facilities. We don't know how well they have been maintained, but I would not discount the fact that, Russia does put an effort in maintaining a credible and reliable nuclear deterrent, especially given how important it is in Russia's sort of self-perception, how often they rely on this self-definition as a major nuclear power in the world. So Russia's nuclear weapons are a serious threat. They have been investing in some novel systems, and to say some of these delivery systems that are also nuclear capable have been extensively used in Ukraine. The hypersonic glide vehicle, the Kinjal, the Calibers, cruise missiles, Iskander ballistic missile. And so
we'll have to leave it there. Fascinating stuff, though. Nuclear expert Mariana Budjeryn, thank you so much for those insights and your time.